Hello and welcome to the agenda on Labour Social. I'm joined by Phil Morehouse of a different bias.
Afternoon, something.
Are you knackered? Are you up all night?
I am. I was unintentionally up all night, but I often am when there's a by-election. And do you know what? I might have had more chance at some sleep. I had a couple of hours in the end because, I should have just done without sleep altogether in the end. But it was just like, oh, there's going to be a result. Oh, the result's really, it's a few minutes away. It's a few minutes away. And then Galloway was obviously prancing about trying to find a 24-hour Tesco or something, because it was like half an hour before they could find him.
Yeah,
to read out.
They didn't want to announce the results until he was there.
Oh yeah, they have to have the candidates there.
Yeah,
especially the winning one.
I went to see June 2. It's very good, Phil. I know you're not into films, but
I read. See, the problem is I've read the book. I didn't mind the sort of 80s. Was it an 80s one? I was in the 80s.
Yeah, David Lynch. Anyway. David Lynch.
Yeah, I didn't mind that one.
Sting, Patrick Stewart, Carl McLaughlin. Great days.
Yeah.
But
Dean
no, it's
Stockwell in it as well.
Yes, the late great Dean Stockwell, Al from Quantum Leap. But no, it's very, very good. And the reason why we went to the midnight showing, it was the only subtitle showing that we could go to this week in the Northeast. So we had to stay up till 3 a.m, but it kept both me and Catherine awake till 3 a.m, and neither of us fell asleep. So that's good.
I mean,
you stayed up watching it by election.
Well, I couldn't get sleep after that. I'm a bit of an insomniac anyway. Couldn't get sleep. So about 5:30, I reckon I got some sleep till about 7:30, and that was that.
Oh, cool. Well, I slept from 4 till about 7:30 this morning. Right. Thank you very much for the super chat, Captain Bart Roberts. Happy Friday. Yeah, it's happier now. Thank you. And Vendetta's being splitting hers. It's not June 2. It's part 2 of the first book. Yeah, but it's called June Part 2. That's what it's called. And Part 3 is probably just going to be the second book. Which looks like it's going to get greenlit, considering this has done rather well. It's got like 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is always a good thing. Anyway, let's talk politics.
Yes.
That's what people are here for. Not here for my movie reviews. So, Labour have been, again, buffeted by the winds of the left and the right, because at the same time that the Tories are claiming that Islamists have taken over the party, they're getting called Islamophobic by George Galloway. So they're a bit. It's like Schrodinger's Labour. They are.
They all hate each other. It's all fine. I mean, Galloway is very. I mean, if you were talking to Max about this morning, if you look at Galloway, I mean, he rubs shoulders with the likes of Nigel Farage, who tentatively endorsed him. Nick Griffin explicitly endorsed him, of the BNP. Well, former BNP. The BNP is not allowed to be anymore. Steve Bannon. Saddam Hussein, bosom buddies with Saddam Hussein when Saddam Hussein had a bosom, and now Vladimir Putin is his number one guy.
He's into his authoritarian, murderous dictators.
Yeah,
his imperialist dictators.
Yeah, you don't really see him hanging around with a lot of figures from the left, even the far left.
Yeah.
He obviously has.
He also said he voted Tory. Remember that a few years ago when he said,
there's
to keep the SNP out, I voted Conservative. And I'm like,
and the thing is as well about this election, what I would say is, first of all, I mean, it's sending a message to Keir Starmer. Like, the only message it's sending to Keir Starmer is that next time he wants a candidate, right? If Labour can't win if they don't have a candidate. But what is the message? That's what I can't really get from anyone. What's the message to Keir Starmer? What does George Galloway want Keir Starmer to do? I didn't get that. I'm not sure. Can anyone help me? What is the message? What does he want Keir Starmer to do?
Stop the war in Gaza.
How is he going to do that? It's not a message to Rishi Sunak, you notice, who also has no power to stop the war in Gaza, but is at least the head of our government. It's not a message to Rishi Sunak. It's a message to Keir Starmer. So what I want to know is, what is the message? Because I mean, it's on a hell of a high frequency, because I can't hear it.
George Galloway cares about one thing in the world, and that thing is George Galloway. Precisely. He really is just he's just not. He's not a nice person. I can't stress this.
Oh no,
he hangs around with a lot of people.
He's like, I mean, I've called him sort of like a left-wing Farage in terms of British politics, yes, but he's maybe more like a left-wing Donald Trump in America.
Is he left-wing?
I think. I mean, you take his word for it. But I mean, if you look at a lot of the causes he's championed before he went completely off the rails, yeah, I think it's fair to say he is genuinely left wing.
I think you can take a measure of a man by the company he keeps, and he keeps company with
yes. I mean, there is that. I did say my own video.
Vladimir Putin.
You take his word for it. He says as a socialist, you take his word for it, right? It's up to him what his politics are. But yes, he's very close to figures on the far right. Can't think of any figures on the left anywhere that he's close to, like prominent figures.
Yeah.
He doesn't even. I mean, although I can't really think of anyone.
Yeah,
that he's close to.
But Yovosh, thank you very much for the €20 super chat. Always good to get euros. Tories to the centre, you're your own kind of sick joke. I don't know if that's targeted towards us. A little love letter there with €20 attached. I don't know. I don't know where you get that there, Yovosh. If you want to follow that up with another note. But I hope you're not calling us some kind of sick joke while throwing money at us, which would be a very strange thing to do. But yeah, George Galloway, he's a nightmare. But do you think he's going to be in the post for very long? I mean, do you think this is just going to be a couple of months?
And it's I mean, he's won, and he won comfortably, and he won comfortably with a high turnout. And actually, I'm quite pleased that the turnout was high, because it means that people in Rochdale didn't just go, oh, we can't be arsed with this. I mean, it's I'd rather people turned out to vote and got a result that I don't like than have a crap turnout. But it's not. I don't see the nightmare scenario for Labour. It's happened before. He's done it before. He's actually won elections against Labour candidates.
Yeah.
Before, and just he'll basically be with Andrew Bridgen on a Friday afternoon talking shit in Parliament. Andrew Bridgen, who yesterday actually called for the death sentence for NHS doctors and nurses.
Yes, nurses
for being NHS doctors and nurses.
He wants the death penalty brought back specifically so the state can execute nurses.
Yeah. So that's what Galloway will be doing. He'll be standing up. Every now and then, of course, he'll get a question in a normal debate. Yeah. But ultimately, but how is it an embarrassment to Labour at all? He's not a Labour candidate. He's not. Yeah, I mean, he has a long.
Well, there was no Labour candidate.
So no, but he isn't anyway. Even in Parliament, like, how is he going to cause Labour trouble? Like, how? What is he going to say that's different to what some other MPs are saying anyway about the situation? Like, it's like, what is he going to do? He's not going to do anything. He's just there out of an act of self-importance. The only difference between now and when he's done this in the past and then quietly farted himself away is, as Sam Coates did make one good point. He was talking about a load of crap, but he did make one good point in that this is the first time Galloway's done this in the age of lightning fast social media, basically. So every time he stands up and does a speech, it'll race around social media. But then you could also argue, so might some videos of him saying, oh, I'm going to vote for the Tories, or, various other abhorrent views he's committed himself to the record. Yeah. So, but it's no issue for Labour. It's not adding another dimension to anything.
I'll tell you what's good that's going to come out of this. What? He won't be able to stand for London Mayor.
Well, that's what he might. But this is my point. If the election is on May the 2nd, he arguably could, because the last time he won a seat, I can't remember where it was, he didn't even try and contest it when it came to the election. Oh, so nice. He will think nothing of going to Rochdale. Right, thanks, I've used you. Now I'm going to go to London. He'll think nothing of that if the election is on May the 2nd. However, if the election is not called for May the 2nd, then he would have to actively step down as an MP. And that makes his grift a little bit obvious, even to those who are a bit blinkered.
I think his grift is already quite obvious.
But it should be, but at the same time, it isn't. It's like anything else. There's lots of things that should be obvious to people and are not. At the end of the day, he won. He did win the by-election. Granted, it's like, I've seen a few people like despairing at the people of Rochdale, but to be fair to them, who were they supposed to vote for? Like, let's go through.
Someone said that this result was replicated across the country, then it would result in Labour getting no seats whatsoever because they'll have withdrawn their support for every candidate.
Yeah.
But yeah, go on.
So who are like, if you look at it, David Tully was the independent who did very well from a standing start. But, you know, even if there was a massive anti-Galloway vote, which I'm not sure there was really the evidence for, but let's say there was, was it obvious to crystallize around him? Because there was no data, there was no polling or anything. No one really knew who, if there was going to be a tactical vote against Galloway, and I'm not saying there would have been if it was obvious, but it wasn't obvious who to be. David Tully came second, but it was a distant second. Azhar Ali, the former Labour candidate, now, if he'd have run the campaign, as he might have expected to anyway, as an anti-Galloway candidate, it might have been interesting. But unfortunately, he took all the interest out of it by tilting to being, he basically made himself an anti-Labour, anti-Starmer Galloway light candidate, which is why then he only got like 7% of the vote. So it was like, why would anyone have voted for Azhar Ali when he decided to make his campaign like the shadow of George Galloway?
Yeah.
What would be the point of voting for him? So that wasn't an anti-Galloway vote. The Conservative candidate, I mean, the Conservatives didn't expect to do anything. The candidate went on holiday. He had a holiday booked.
I wasn't even there.
The Lib Dems had no idea. Obviously, you know, they have this thing where they don't waste resources. Like the Lib Dems don't waste resources if Labour are going to win it, and Labour don't waste resources if the Lib Dems are going to win it.
Yeah.
So the Lib Dems, again, weren't expecting, they hadn't, I mean, they have quite a good by-election campaign machine, but they weren't geared up for it. I don't know whether they actually could have stood a chance anyway, maybe not, but they certainly weren't expecting to, and you can't expect to suddenly get a campaign going 2 weeks away. So they had no chance. The Greens had to abandon their candidate, although I don't think the Greens would have realistically won either. Yeah. But nonetheless, they had to bin their candidate. Like, who would you like? The best case scenario, in all honesty, the best case scenario for Labour would have been the Monster Raving Looney Party winning, and they didn't get their deposit.
Given the situation, yeah. But I mean, this is coming off the back of obviously a string of by-election wins by Labour, most notably recently in Kingswood and in Wellingborough. And if they're to, you know, those were massive Tory majorities that they managed to overturn. Someone in the chat there, first thing Labour need to do is get rid of Starmer. They're 20 points ahead in the polls.
26 points in YouGov, which admittedly is the biggest one. But also YouGov are one of the more reliable ones. You don't just say, oh, it's the biggest one, therefore we discount it. It's like, I think they're inflating Reform UK, but they've had a recent habit of being sort of quite close to being right.
But I don't think this is going to keep any Labour people awake at night worrying.
No, there's no crisis meeting with Starmer today about this. None at all. Yeah. As soon as they withdrew, in fact, I think, you know, because it took, although the Tories are over-egging it, it did take about, I reckon it was about 44 hours to bin Azhar Ali after the revelations first came to light, which was a Saturday evening, but in a Saturday night, but in reality, the news came out, was published on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And rather than acting quickly, and as I say, if they weren't going to act quickly, they should have at least said, we're going to investigate. And I wonder if their initial decision to say, well, he is our candidate still, was because they didn't want to contemplate, because they knew it would give Galloway a clear run.
Right.
But it's not that big a disaster for them. You know, it's like, you know, I don't know why Labour think it's going to be a big disaster for them. He's just going to be, there are already people in Parliament who are trying to weaponise the situation in Gaza against Labour. He's just going to be one more person doing it. Who gives a shit?
Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on this week as well. I mean, the one that really stuck out to me, sort of talking about Islamophobia, is the Tories not wanting to call what that absolute muttonhead Neanderthal said last week Islamophobia, because if they do, then they would have to admit what Suella Braverman wrote in the Telegraph last week is also Islamophobia.
Braverman is arguably worse. What Braverman's saying is worse. The way the Tories are trying to justify saying that Anderson's is worse is because he implicated a specific politician in Sadiq Khan, whereas Braverman is talking very generally and not accusing any sitting senior politician of being in hock with it.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, in terms of what she's saying, her comments are worse.
Yeah, absolutely vile. I mean, so you had Neanderthal saying that the Labour Party has been taken over by Islamists. She was saying, and the London mayor, actually, Sadiq Khan, has allowed Islamists to run the capital. And yet, Suella Braverman, who was till just a few months ago our Home Secretary, was saying that the entire country is run by Islamists.
Yeah.
I mean, just what? What? But she's a Buddhist, and Buddhists never do anything bad, except for what the Buddhists in Burma.
I mean, I strongly suspect she's not.
The Rohingya Muslims.
Yeah, I strongly suspect she's not.
The Buddhist government of Sri Lanka did to the Tamil Tigers. Anyway, Brad, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. That's really kind of you, really generous. Thank you. Galloway can now buy a spandex cat suit from the Primark he says he wants back in Rochdale. So yeah, wow. Bring back some early noughties horror there of George Galloway on the TV show Big Brother, in which he dressed up in a leotard and pretended to be a cat.
Yeah.
Because it was a crazy time, Phil. It was a crazy time. What can I say? I thought this is going to do my political.
But this is the thing about because. I'm not in Rochdale, and I've tried to see some campaigning stuff, but I didn't get, sometimes I have people who will from a local area will email me stuff that's been sent around, right? But I didn't get it on this occasion, or didn't see it if I did. But I don't really know what Galloway, the only thing he promised that I saw is, what was it? He promised that if he was elected, which he's now been, that would be the end of Keir Starmer. So I've got the feed open. I'm just waiting for the announcement of Keir Starmer resigning. So I'm sure that'll come at some point. But assuming it doesn't, I suspect what may actually happen is that the day after the general election, George Galloway will be looking around for a new grift, and Keir Starmer will be the Prime Minister.
Yeah. We've got some conflicting comments coming here. We've got a super chat, which I have to acknowledge. KMD123. Thank you very much for the £2 super chat. Phil, supporting the clown Corbyn, has allowed it. I don't know what you mean by it. Maybe the movie It.
It's Schrödinger Phil again. It's Schrödinger Phil. Depending on who you ask, it's either my fault Jeremy Corbyn didn't win the election in 2019, or I was supporting Corbyn. It's like, one or the other. There's no real consensus on that one.
Schrödinger's Phil.
In reality, I quite openly will say, yes, I preferred Jeremy Corbyn to Boris Johnson. And there's nothing that Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't have done that Boris Johnson hadn't done and worse. So, at the end of the day, that's sometimes what you've got. You've just got bad choices. You don't get, in fact, you never get exactly what you want. Like, is Keir Starmer my idea?
I think the Rolling Stones once sang a song about that.
Did they? I'll take your word for it. I'm not a fan of the Rolling Stones.
Shocking. Do you like the Beatles, though? You do like the Beatles?
No. Well.
Oh, my God, that's it. Okay, this show is over. Right, turn all the lights off. We're done here. Bye, everyone.
Here's the thing. I acknowledge, I will say they're a great brand, just like the Rolling Stones, because that's determined by majority opinion, and most people think they're geniuses, but I just didn't see it. There are some songs which are quite nice. There are some songs which I go, if I say to Alexa, actually, I better not say it too loud, but she might do it. If I say to Alexa that, play 60s music, some Beatles stuff will come on. And usually the stuff that comes on when I ask for that is decent, like, Here Comes the Sun and stuff like that. Yeah. But some of it is just like, I can't really relate to it because I've never been on drugs.
Well, neither have I, but still, like...
Queen is where it's at.
Oh, mate, you're saying this on the internet. People are going to clip this up. And then when it's the Labour Party conference in October in Liverpool, you won't be allowed in.
I've never said a word against them. They're just not for me.
The Beatles were overrated.
Well, if you like, but nonetheless, I accept the fact that most people agree that they were one of the greatest bands ever, if not the greatest band.
12 amazing albums in 8 years.
So,
there's a little meme that goes around with the Beatles on it. Says, "Sorry for setting the bar so high." Anyway, Aidan says,
but for a peace-loving group, they didn't half argue with each other.
Yeah,
like Queen. The Queen band members had their differences, but they kept coming together. They stayed friends. They went off and did their own solo stuff, and then came back again.
Right? Well, I think that would have happened had some crazy American not murdered John Lennon. I think that definitely would have happened.
It wasn't happening, was it?
The lines were coming together. Well, it was.
The fact that they anyway,
they fell out, but it was only 10 years, not that long. Right. Anyway,
10 years.
Johnny,
that's a hell of a grudge.
It's apparently they saw each other. Well, Lennon and McCartney saw each other before he died. Right, Johnny, £5 super chat. Thank you very much. Mark my words. Those who think Starmer is a Tory in disguise, he is going to be such a surprise to most of you. Yes, I agree for that. That, Johnny. Thank you very much.
Yes and no. People will it'll never be good enough. And in some ways it won't. There will be things that Labour don't do that I think they should do, and that I think, and I'm always one who'll say, I try and understand what is politically possible. But there'll still be things where I think they're going to be too cautious. But yeah, for some people, it'll never be good enough. It'll never be as good as it would have been if X, Y, or Z had been in charge instead. It'll never be as good as if Rebecca Long Bailey, the secret strategic genius, was in charge. But that's just politics. It's like, the result today. I can say, if Labour had a candidate, they'd have been nailed on to win that. And someone might say, well, you can't prove that. No, I can't prove it. No, I can't prove it. And because I can't prove it, you could make the argument, as some people have, that actually it's another good day for Labour, because let us imagine that Galloway did have a chance. I don't believe he did, but let's say he did. Never find out, will we? So Labour, it would have been deeply embarrassing for them if they'd have had a candidate, fully supported that candidate, put their full campaign machine in, the same campaign machine that won Mid-Bedfordshire, losing to Galloway in Rochdale, which was not even in doubt in 2019. And that would be deeply damaging for Labour. That actually would have been a crisis. That would have been a genuine crisis, been averted because they didn't have a candidate.
Indeed. Some comments coming in saying Queen better than the Beatles. I think Queen are fantastic. Someone said they're a singles band more than an album band, and the Beatles were more of an album band, especially later on in their career. But no, I think that Queen are phenomenal. The Beatles are phenomenal. Rolling Stones are phenomenal. But I've only seen one live of those three, which is the Rolling Stones, which I've seen twice actually. But yes, I've seen Paul McCartney live, which is pretty cool. And I might go and see. There's like Queen, isn't there? But they have a different singer.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But it's not really Queen. But maybe at some point. I just want to come to a point that's just been made, not on the chat, but in our WhatsApp group. About AB said, anyone done the Brexit Willy Wonkaland in Glasgow observation yet? I don't think anyone has, or at least I haven't seen it. So this was a story this week about there was a Willy Wonkaland set up in Glasgow, and it was this AI art that made it all look amazing. And then when people turned up, it was like an empty warehouse with like a trestle table and a chemistry set with a very unhappy woman standing behind it, looking completely bored. I guess she was supposed to be the Oompa Loompa. And they charged people £40 for this experience. And I think, we really do need to be drawing parallels between that and what we were promised and what we were delivered when it comes to Brexit. So,
usually it's like Winter Wonderland type attractions that con people like that, isn't it?
Yeah. But this was absolutely shocking. I mean, if you see the photos from it, it's like upsetting to know that people got ripped off, but also it's absolutely hilarious to see just how bad it was. Just absolutely no redeeming qualities at all. I had a bit of a similar experience. This was back in 1999. In the summer of 1999, there was a Star Wars Episode 1 exhibition, like down at like the O2 or something in London. And I went to it, and it was awful. It was so bad. It was like some props from the film scattered about. And I was bought it as a present. I'm glad I didn't pay for it myself, but pretty bad. Pretty bad. Oh, we got another super chat. Thank you very much to Antirhinum Valentium. I think that sounds like a spell from Harry Potter. Is it worth doing things like swap my vote if you're in a safe seat? I've seen it described as tactical voting on steroids. Yeah, I think so. If you're in a safe seat and you want to get rid of the Tories. What do you think, Phil?
Stop the Tories.vote will be having I believe, swap my vote feature to it as well, because people do want to do that. There's enough people who want to do that.
And then you get to vote for the party that you want, and also be able to try and get the Tories out at the same time. So it's the best of both worlds, as we like to say. There's the Oompa Loompa lady did make an effort, but got ground down by just how upset people were by it being grim. And where says, to be fair, Star Wars Episode 1 was pretty bad anyway. Yeah,
it started amazingly well. It was superb, and then the end was sort of the end fight scene was good.
I'm sure glad I didn't fly all the way to New York to see it, because it came out 2 months earlier in America than it did in the UK.
I mean, the only one who sort of did well out of that, Weird Al Yankovic, paid a lot of money to get in the preview so he could do his song. It was done to the music of American Pie.
Yes.
That was a good one. So he got a good deal out of going early to watch it.
Someday I'm going to be a Jedi. Let's not get back into movies, but Star Wars Episode 1 is just a plotless mess of a movie. It feels like a first draft. It's got no main character.
Well, I mean, Ewan McGregor said himself, didn't he? He did the 3 prequels and the third one was good.
I went to
you're not even convinced about that.
No, I went to the premiere of the third one in Leicester Square, and I got to shout up at George Lucas at the end because they were on the balcony, and I got to shout out, much better than the last 2. Thumbs up, cheeky little smile. And I got a wave off Christopher Lee, which I'll always hold in my heart. Good old Christopher Lee. Oh, what a guy. But just when people talk about how much they hate the studio system, right? Point out that Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3 were basically funded from George Lucas's own private fortune. He had no executives over him saying, "What is this? How about you read the script before you actually make the film?"
To be fair, executives don't always make good decisions. The executives for the original Star Wars films wanted Chewbacca in trousers because they thought, hang on, he's naked, isn't he?
Yeah.
So,
but also pressure on George Lucas to actually make it good, especially his wife at the time, who re-edited the whole movie and improved it a million times by editing it. If he didn't have that pressure, I don't think it would have been that good. Same with Lennon and McCartney. They were never as good separated as they were together because of the rivalry, because they had to try and prove. They had to prove something. Once they had nothing left to prove, they were like, "Oh, all right, I'll just do a song." And it was never quite as genius. So there you go. Jar Jar Bloody Binks says.
Yeah,
Michael.
that was a bad one. That was clearly a character created for the merchandising.
Oh, it was awful, and it just looked crap as well. It just wasn't.
There was zero way that anyone not thinking about toys would have come up with that character.
But yeah, I mean, George Lucas is George Lucas. He was trying to push the technology at the time.
Yeah.
But I was surprised to find out that Star Wars Episode 2 was filmed in not even HD. It was filmed in HDV format. For the techie people out there, that means it's 1440 pixels wide, and the pixels are slightly not square in order to compensate, and that's why some of the digital effects in it look proper ropey, because it's really low resolution. Like, you've got 4K on your phones now, so you could make a sci-fi epic that looks better than Star Wars Episode 2 on your phone, possibly, if you know your way around After Effects. Anyway, right, so what else has been going on this week apart from Navalny being buried in Moscow? And crowds have gathered, very brave people. Obviously, we've had the Rochdale, Galloway saying it's Starmer's worst nightmare. I really don't think it is, mate. I think
he's focused on the Tories at the moment. Tories are his issue, not Galloway.
Yeah. And then there's news come out that basically we've been tempted with these tax cuts, right, Phil? So they've been saying, there's going to be tax cuts in this upcoming budget, which is next week, is it?
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
I tell you what would be hilarious, Because what they want, they failed with the national insurance tax cut in January. It didn't fool people. Oh, bollocks. So you're going to have to do something really big. And they don't want it to fall flat. If it falls flat, I don't know what they're going to do. Wouldn't it be hilarious if next Wednesday, just before PMQs, Lee Anderson crosses, because last week in PMQs, even though he's got the whip withdrawn, he was sat on the government benches. Wouldn't it be great if he crossed the floor and everyone went, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm a Reform UK MP now. Didn't I mention it?" That would somewhat distract from the budget announcement on Wednesday afternoon. So if Lee Anderson is planning that, I don't know what he's planning. If he's planning it, absolutely the best time to do it is just before PMQ starts. You take your seat on the Conservative benches. No one bat an eyelid when he did it last week.
Yeah.
And then, just as Rishi Sunak comes into the chamber and takes his seat, up you get, walk across the other side.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want Lee Anderson to take central stage because he's a bloody lunatic. And he's a bit.
But it'd be a good way, from his point of view, to derail. That would cause maximum embarrassment to Sunak just before PMQs and the budget.
So, 2p tax cut in doubt after gloomier forecast on UK economy, reports the iNewspaper today. Wow. Official watchdog tells Jeremy Hunt his draft for next week's budget is too expensive and will deliver less growth than hoped. We're not going to get any growth. I don't think we're going to see a bit of growth in this country for another 10 years. And that'll be like 27 years of no growth.
There are some interesting things being reported, though. They're throwing a few things out, little feelers. And it includes a couple of Labour policies. And they're doing it to screw Labour over. So two of the things there, Jeremy Hunt is reportedly eyeing up, maybe, he's not obviously committing to anything until he announces it on Wednesday, is scrapping non-dom status, which is Labour policy, and applying windfall taxes to oil and gas companies. And the way this would screw Labour over, because you'd think, well, Labour are proposing that anyway, what's the big deal? Labour are proposing it as a way of funding the investment they want. Because despite the fact people go, "Oh, Labour are just going to do austerity," it's like, no, they know they need to spend more and they're planning on spending more.
Yeah.
And they need the money for that. Part of that comes from basically getting rid of tax breaks. So applying windfall taxes to oil and gas companies, which a lot of people keep thinking already happened. No, it's never happened. When Rishi Sunak eventually applied windfall taxes, it was to renewable energy providers, not oil and gas companies, and certainly not British Gas. But what Hunt will do is he'll use that to cut taxes. So he won't use it for investment. So then Labour will find themselves, maybe just a few weeks before the election is called, with a big hole in their spending plans, which will force them to say either they'll increase borrowing, which obviously is something they don't want to do at the moment, or increase some other taxes to compensate, which they don't want to do, or cut back their spending plans, which they don't want to do. So the idea is it could put Labour in a hole. The problem is it also arguably puts the Conservatives in a hole, because there's some Conservative opponents of Sunak
like to do that
already saying that he's a socialist. How are they going to react to him saying, yeah, we should tax the rich even more?
Well, yeah, indeed. But yeah, one of the other things that has come out this week as well is this fact that so many people don't trust political parties anymore. I don't know if you saw this.
It's record low trust
20% last year, or 2022, down to 12%.
It's about 12. It's 12.
Yeah, it's gone down.
It's really bad. It's record low. It was ironically at a record high when the last Labour government were in power, but even then it was never high. It's never high for politics. I mean, let's be clear. 12% sounds really, it is low, and it is a record low. It never gets up to like 50% or anything.
Yeah,
politicians are always mistrusted. Sometimes fairly, I think mostly not unfairly. But there we go. It's but yeah, I mean, Labour have got a real job to do. Labour do have, I do keep pointing this out sometimes, Labour do have a shadow minister, which means they will have a minister for democracy, Flo Eshalomi, whose job basically it is to implement reforms which will hopefully try and restore trust in politics, but it will be it will not be easy.
Yeah.
It will not be easy.
So, I mean, there's at this point, right? We've got the budget next week. Let's have some predictions. Is there anything that the Tories can pull out of their hat to get back on track in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, what I've just said, what they can do is there's lots of things they can do. Or at the end of the day, all they have to do is persuade the Office of Budgetary Responsibility that they can afford the tax cuts in a way that it is funded. They just put up other taxes. Like, they know they can't do much in terms of cutting spending, although they will do because they're Tories at the end of the day. But they know they've cut spending to the bone already. They can just raise other taxes. They're already talking quite openly about completely new taxes, like extra taxes on vaping products and stuff. That's a new tax.
Yeah.
It's a tax that doesn't currently exist. So, yeah, of course they can do it. They can apply windfall taxes. They can get rid of non-dom status. They can do all of this thing. They can charge private schools VAT. I don't see them quite going that far. But they can do all of these things if they wanted to. And if they did it, it would actually cause Labour a problem. That they could argue to their MPs that they could do this. And if they win the election, because what they could do, Jeremy Hunt could privately tell his MPs, look, Labour are going to do this anyway if they win. So why don't we just do it and give ourselves a chance? And if they win, they'll just do what they did in 1992, reverse it all straight. It won't even be implemented.
Yeah.
It won't even be implemented. They'll just reverse it.
Well, I mean, they won't get a chance.
They reversed the actual tax cuts themselves in 92.
Yeah.
They announced in their budget tax cuts, then immediately called an election, won the election, then put them back up again.
This is a bit of a Tory tactic there.
Because no one's calling it out. Like no one in the media says, "Oh, by the way, 92." Because all the Tories at the moment trying to persuade themselves that it's winnable. Because what about 92? The only comparison with 92 is that the Tory government at the time announced a tax cutting budget and then immediately put the taxes back up straight away afterwards.
Yeah. But I mean, what the idea that like Labour are going to sort of show their hand and then the Tories are going to steal all their policies just before the election. I just can't see the Tories going for that. I don't think
there's pros and cons to it, definitely. But I mean, Alex Wickham, I think it was, someone from Bloomberg made a good point. Now that the reports are out that Hunt is thinking of, for example, scrapping non-dom status.
Yes.
If he doesn't now announce that, people could accuse Sunak of intervening and going, "Oh, well, we heard you were going to scrap non-dom status. Now you haven't." Did Rishi Sunak personally intervene because, he sort of is a bit of a fan of the old non-doms?
Yes, he is. Well, I mean, the interesting thing I found out just yesterday was that Michael Gove originally suggested getting VAT put on school fees. It was Michael Gove. It was a Tory policy that was floated, and obviously didn't go very far because they didn't want to pay more for their kids to go to little Torquay and Guinevere. They shouldn't have to pay more. Tinkinator, thank you very much for the super chat. £10. Woo. I don't care about growth. The only good jobs are in a green economy. I'd rather have a smaller cake and more people get a fairer slice than a bigger cake that billionaires own virtually all of. I think you're right on that. So just say, I think you're right. But my issue is, you're right. The billionaires are getting everything. The economy should have grown some way in the last 17 years, and it hasn't. Per capita, it has shrank, and yet that money has been generated. It's just not come back to us. It's not just it's literally gone out the country. Obviously it's all on the computers now, but you can imagine like literally suitcases full of £50 notes being taken out of the country every single day that the Tories have been in power and going elsewhere, going to other countries, and that's the situation that we've got at the moment. So when I say growth, I mean, I want more money to stay in this country. Anyway, sorry, what are you going to say, Phil?
I was just going to say you would get more growth anyway.
Yes.
If more people, if there was an equitable or a more equitable distribution of wealth, then you would naturally grow more because, people would be, like, I basically generate my income. So my income is, if I don't do videos, I don't get income. If I spend more time trying to make those videos better, I will get more income. If I'm a bit lazy, I will get less income. So I'm motivated to do my best. And so would other people be if they were like, I can't imagine that Oompa Loompa that you were describing, or potential Oompa Loompa, was all that motivated.
No.
Because, so if people can see that this is why private companies have like bonus schemes and stuff.
Yeah.
They sometimes like misalign, but it's a way of saying, if you go the extra mile, you will personally benefit.
Yeah.
So if you have a better distribution of wealth, then people will be more innovative. People will come up with better ways of doing things.
There's so many people enjoy their work, they're more productive. Full stop.
But even beyond that, there's so many people in the workplace can see that a mistake's been made by management, stuff like that, and they don't pipe up. And it might be the manager's a dickhead and won't listen to you anyway, but some will listen to you, and people just can't be asked. They're just going in and to do the work and go home and stuff like that. But if you make people involved and you give them some reason, then people will be more innovative and they'll come up with better ideas, and you will make your economy stronger and it will grow.
Yeah. So John Hart, thank you very much for the £2 super chat. Super chat. NATO in Ukraine, or is Macron just winding up Putin? This a couple of days ago, it was reported.
That Scholz wasn't happy, was he?
Putting troops on the ground, suggested by Macron, the president of France, in the Ukraine situation. I don't know. I this is the sort of thing I'd like to discuss with other content creators such as yourself, Phil, political commentators. But I mean, I wouldn't go and protest against that happening, because I think what's happening in Ukraine is absolutely abhorrent, and the fact it's happening on our doorstep and we're not doing that much about it.
Putin
is a.
I know the spectre of nuclear escalation is like really worrying people, but Putin has had so many red lines. Says, if you cross that line, I don't promise not to use nuclear weapons. And then we cross the line. Oh no, now I'm drawing a new line. And with so many lines have been crossed, and yet he still hasn't. So I think we should have fought a conventional war here. I think NATO should have gone in to support them, and we could have kicked Russia out by now, and that would have been that. Should have done it in 2014 when it would have been easy. Didn't.
Yeah.
Should have done it by now, and it would have been cheaper and easier and all be done and dusted now.
Well, but Putin's a bully, and like all bullies, they will continue to push till someone pushes back.
Yes.
And because that's what bullies do. That's what Boris Johnson did. He just kept pushing to see how far he could get.
If as soon as they launched all those tanks, which, by the way, let us not forget that a certain George Galloway, the day before those tanks rolled over the Ukrainian border, was saying, look, I told you they weren't going to invade. All those people who said they were should be a bit more humble. They should shut up. They're looking foolish. And then the day later, they rolled over, and he hasn't said anything since.
He called up, Vladimir, but you said you wouldn't invade.
Because he was. Do you remember at the time? Because on Twitter he was listed as a Russian state affiliate, and he objected to Elon Musk. The only time Elon Musk has ever done anything I've approved of, and he responded back in like Russian characters. Sorry, comrade.
Yeah. But it's all a bit not great. Michael Warner, sorry, just to say, complete non sequitur here. The Labour Social tonight will actually be Graham's birthday piss up, which is true, Phil. That's the plans for tonight. And hopefully I'll find out today whether I've got this job that I went for this week. I've not said on the channel what it is, but if we do get it, there'll be some changes on this channel. If I don't get it, we'll continue doing what we do. But yeah, I should be finding out about that today. So one way or another, I'm going to want to drink. Will you be around tonight, or are you?
I don't. Again, it's
things
like
to do.
Got gym tonight. Arm day tonight.
Well, you can come after. You don't have to be there for 9 o'clock.
Possibly, but it depends what time we get back.
Kind of formats.
I don't know what time we get back, or how tired I will be, because I'd like 2 hours sleep.
I want to get Larry and Paul. Do Broken News. I want to get them on. I think that'd be brilliant. If you're not subscribed to Broken News, Larry and Paul, please subscribe to them. They're very, very funny, and they're trying to build up their YouTube following at the moment. There you go. And Siskin Edge says, I hope you get it, Graham. Yeah. That could be taken a number of ways, but yes, I hope so. But we will see. We will see. So yeah, it is the second anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russian troops, and actually, it's the 10-year anniversary this week, or it was this week, of the invasion of Crimea that started all this, and it started because Putin wasn't happy about the leadership, the people who had been democratically elected to run the country.
Well, he wanted more. He's just that's just a facade. He's a pirate king. He needed more loot for his oligarchs.
He's only got the biggest country in the world, Phil. I mean,
yeah, but they're because he's given all the bits of it to people who don't know how to run industries. They've run those industries down, so they run really inefficiently. They're not very profitable, and he needs to keep feeding them shinies. So he is basically Melkor to his oligarchs, Mongolians. But the
Lord of the Rings reference there.
Well, Silmarillion,
old school Silmarillion.
But I would say obviously I'm not an expert on these matters. So NATO shouldn't take my advice. But I would have thought if in 2022 NATO, at the request of Ukraine, had gone, right, we're just going to go in and kick them. If a pissing tractor can take out a Russian armored carrier, then I'm pretty sure NATO can. And they could have kicked them out. Putin would no longer be in charge there. He couldn't have survived that politically, could he? If he was instantly kicked out of Ukraine. Yeah. Humiliating defeat. How on earth would he have survived? He would not have survived. No. And that would be, and I'm not saying Russia will be in a great place. Now, Russia will never be in a great place.
They'll just replace him with another oligarch. I mean, Russia's got a sad, long history of strong men running the place, and if you're not strong enough, then
it's because they've never been invaded.
Gather you and your family in a basement somewhere and shoot you all dead.
It's that arrogance of never really having been defeated. I think it's the same. We have the same issue to a certain extent in this country as well. Only we don't actively want to take over Europe.
Yes. But also, I mean, there's a slight the brutality isn't there. Do you know what I mean? The sort of the assassination of political opponents, thank God, isn't happening, particularly in this country. But in Russia, that has been a long-standing tradition. I think it was the cabinet of Kyrgyzstan, I think it was, or it might have been Uzbekistan, in the 1930s, were all taken to a quarry and all shot in the back of the head one night by Stalin's command because he didn't like any of them. So there you go. They're not in charge anymore. Brad W, thank you very much for the super chat there. Cancel the Winter Olympics. Putin acted in Crimea, and why do Ukraine immediately after WO events? That's the cause. That's the curse stroke trigger. Yeah, the fact that they got the Winter Olympics in Sochi and the World Cup. They held the World Cup in Russia in 2018, and then they moved it to Qatar because Russia wasn't bad enough. And now, you know where they're going in the 2030s? Saudi Arabia. They're going to hold the Football World Cup in Saudi Arabia. One of the most brutal, oppressive, cruel, unjust, misogynistic, homophobic.
Yeah. His head of government murdered someone he didn't like.
And
openly murdered someone he didn't like.
And brutally murdered him as well. And Kagoshi. And also, it's one of the most expensive countries in the world. So good luck getting a ticket if you come from a country that doesn't have much money. And you don't have much money yourself because you don't have a particularly good job in that country because maybe you didn't go to private school.
But Peter saying Russia was invaded in 1941 just that they survived it. It's been invaded a lot of times. There's a lot of people thought they could take Russia and they never have. Apart from, ironically, the Russians.
Including what's his name? Napoleon.
Napoleon had a go,
Failed.
It's all a bit cold.
Good old 1812 overture. There you go. Some good stuff come out of Russia, though, to be fair. Some good literature, some good music. Alec Barrett, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. That's really kind. Thank you. The last people to take over Russia with the Golden Horde. There you go. Was it Genghis Khan? Genghis Khan, more like. He can take over everything, all the way to Vienna, maybe. So Russia was invaded in 1941. Just they survived it. And Jess says it must be a terrible thing living in a country run by oligarchs, high on the myth of a glorious past. Well, that's a very good point. And one of the things that we talk about sometimes on this channel is the importance of the way you frame stuff. And I think it would be really helpful if we called the Tufton Street billionaires who run everything, if we called them oligarchs, because that's what they are. Oligarch basically means ruled by the rich, or ruled by the few who are rich. Tetris, says Christopher. Another great thing to come out of Russia. If you're bored, type in the history of the Soviet Union to the tune of Tetris. Honestly, after this, just type that into YouTube, see what comes up. You won't be able to get the tune out of your head for weeks. And Billy says Vikings built Russia. There you go. Didn't know that. And TMS says there's a lot of people who thought they could take Scotland, but never have. Well, the Romans certainly didn't, because they built a wall. Yeah. In fact, they built 2 walls. Is it the Antone Wall, the northern one? There's nothing left of it.
Don't know.
There's Hadrian's, obviously the famous one, but there was another one. There was another one. Let me know in the chat. And Jez says Sunak is an oligarch. I can't think of a better way to describe it, because it really is this self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where they come in and, you know, the next generation are coming up now, and it's all the same type of people. Fingers crossed. Touch wood. We're talking about someone's job there. Sorry. Good luck with anyone else who's going for a job as well. And then Patra is saying WEF versus Tufton Street lobby groups. And I find that interesting that in Prime Minister's questions, this happens a lot, especially when Boris Johnson was leader of the Tories, but also it's happened quite a lot under Sunak. He'll refer to the union paymasters in control of Labour.
Oh, yeah.
Why doesn't Starmer hit back with, like, hang on, half your funding comes from Russia? Why does he not?
I think the reason... So,
Antonine.
Early-ish on, when Boris Johnson started things like that, where he started talking shit and Starmer will just ignore it and carry on. And I think the way I look at it is I think he's just trying to avoid getting... Because they're trying to distract him. And I think that's what he's just trying to avoid, is going, no, I'm going to make my points here. I'm just going to completely ignore all of your diversionary tactics, and I'm going to carry on with my point here. So I think that's what it's about.
But, I mean...
But what they should do to make those points is, you know, do something like, I don't know, have a social media strategy where straight away afterwards, they can, instead of getting, you know, something like, you know, Peter Stavanovich sometimes does, but Keir Starmer can do it. Oh, in PMQs, you know, that useless prick Rishi Sunak said these things. Well, here's my response to them now that I've got a little more time.
I'd love to see Keir Starmer refer to Rishi Sunak as a useless prick.
He's allowed to do it outside of Parliament. It's not it doesn't matter then. No
unparliamentary language. Unparliamentary, right? Like when James Cleverly called.
He could honestly, because Starmer could do that. I don't know who's telling him that he needs to behave like the sort of lawyer he is. You know, he should just say, look, in PMQs today, that great long streak of piss had these things to say. Here are my top 5 responses if I'd have had more time.
Yeah. Yeah. Jez is he's dissing the ancient Scots here. He's saying, no offense to the Scots, but the Romans didn't think it was worth conquering. Oh, come on.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Rome wanted to conquer everything.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure they did.
Deserts, for goodness sake. And they didn't have any nation of oil back then.
Do you know the big mistake of Hannibal when he came over the
it wasn't Hannibal's mistake, it was his government's mistake.
Well, he came over with his elephants over the Alps and he basically took Rome. But he didn't sack it. He didn't destroy Rome.
He was told not to. He was ordered not to.
Beautiful buildings. Whereas the counter strike by Rome years later, they literally flattened Carthage.
But that was not Hannibal. He was just the general. It was the Carthaginian government that said, "Oh, they've learnt their lesson. We'll leave them alone now." Yeah, the lesson they learnt was to build a big bloody army and take out all enemies.
Yes, raise everything to the ground. Bastards. It is quite depressing, actually. You can go if you go to Tunis, the capital of Tunisia. You can actually go to ancient Carthage, and there's not enough. There's not a lot left. Put it that way. But you can also go to Troy. Well,
I'm going to say there's more of it left than Troy, surely.
Yeah, in Turkey, which lay undiscovered for millennia because it was just that effectively destroyed. But there you go. Okay, so Johnny Copperhead, thank you very much for this. Maybe the last super chat of this particular edition of the agenda. Thank you very much. Can I point out that Scotland was conquered by the Scots?
Was it though? Because like I don't. It doesn't really count if you just like move the badgers out of the way. So I'm pretty sure the Celts were the first people to yeah. It's not really conquering it if you're just the first people there. It's settling. It's settling.
I find it fascinating that back in the day there were two mega continents, one called Wonderland or something, new one's called Laurasia or something like that, and England comes from one bit of it, England, Scotland, and Scotland comes from the other. So the actual border between Scotland and England is possibly the oldest border in the world. I learned that on Map Men, which is another great YouTube show that you should definitely watch because it's very good, very funny, and very interesting. Alec Barrett. Oh, I was saying I spoke too soon about that being the last super chat. We've got another one. Yay! Troy is better known as Wilusa in the records. There you go. And it's interesting because Helen of Troy was actually Greek. I don't know why she's called Helen of Troy. She wasn't.
Well, she married a Trojan, didn't she? That's what caused, according to the myth, anyway. All the argy-bargy.
Well, she ran away. No, she ran away with Paris, didn't she? She eloped, or maybe he kidnapped her. I don't know. But you can tell, like, if you read the Iliad and its sequel, the Odyssey. I hate sequels. Everything's sequels these days. They said in 700 BC. It doesn't really glamorize the war side of things a lot. It just says it was awful and everyone died. It's not very. It doesn't revel in the glory of war like some of the sort of more Roman sort of thinking. It was sort of like, isn't more futile and horrible, and a bit silly as well. Oh, Johnny Cophead, there you go. Troy is in Cambridgeshire, says Johnny Cophead, which has just ruined my grasp of geography. There you go. So
well, there's a hell in America, but I mean, you know, it's actually quite a cold place. In fact, hell does freeze over quite regularly there.
Does it? Oh my word. There's a Truth or Consequences in America, which I quite like. And there's a Lake Disappointment in Australia, which I quite like, which is usually dry. So you dried up lake bed. It's a bit of a disappointment. My favourite name of a place, Phil, is there's a place on Pitcairn Island called Oh Dear.
And there's always odd places when you go around. In Doncaster, there's like my favourite couple of names of streets. There's a Warning Tongue Lane. So you try and imagine how they got these names. There's a Warning Tongue Lane. You sort of imagine this old witcher used to have a go at anyone who walked down it. And there's a Butthole Lane, which is quite a posh, there's expensive houses on it. People pay a lot of money to live on Butthole Lane.
Is that as in like a water butt? Or is it?
Who knows? But it is BUTT Hole Lane.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Well, we're just around the corner from my dad's old shop in West Derby, just by Norris Green. There's a 3-butt lane, which always just made me laugh when I was a kid. 3-butt lane. Apparently water butts, but you know.
Yes, I'm sure it is. But you know, nonetheless,
well, down the road
when certain meanings of words fall out of general use, and you're just left with what it is now, some of these names do look a bit odd.
But there's a place in Durham, not far from me, called Pity Me. Like 2 words, pity me. Just like, what? Okay. Bit of a strange place name, but there you go. And it's just like, oh, I'm going, where are you going? I'm going to Sainsbury's.
Well, there are
pity me.
Interested in these. I mean, in Scunthorpe, there's this big old road into it from the motorway called Mortal Ash Hill, and it's next to the steelworks. And you got the impression, does that mean loads of people died because of the ash before we had like environmental laws?
Yes, I can imagine that. Also, Scunthorpe. Anyway, twat in Scotland, same for us. We're totally getting demonetized at this point. No, we were saying the names of place names. There is a shit in Iran. There's a place just called Shit. I've not been there. Might be quite nice. I went to Shit. It was quite nice. But there you go. I've been to quite a few Liverpools around the world. I've been to Liverpool in Canada, Liverpool in Costa Rica, which is a Del Monte plantation, where the man from Del Monte says yes.
They were lazy, some of the settlers in North America, weren't they? They just called places the places they'd come from.
Yeah.
It's just lazy.
There's some really cool places that have got names after the local, the local indigenous people, what they called the place, or some bastardization of what they called the place. I think Chicago translates to something like rotten onion patch or something like that. From
there's at least a bit of there's a bit of like, thoughts gone into it. Instead of like, oh, we'll go here, we'll call it York. We'll just come from York. We'll call it New York. All right.
Well, it used to be New Amsterdam. I know that
Oh,
because
that's
of
true.
the song.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah.
Anyway, why they changed it, I can't say. Perhaps they liked it better that way. Although that was Istanbul. Okay. All right,
I mean,
mate.
Nova Scotia tried to hide it, didn't they? They just, we'll do it in a different language, then no one will guess. New Scotland.
Yes, New Scotland. There's a New Britain. Well, there's a New Britain, a New Scotland. There's a New England, obviously, in the US. There's a New Ireland off the coast of Papua New Guinea. Yeah. And there's a New South Wales.
Yeah.
But there's nowhere
Virginia as well.
There's nowhere called the New North Wales, which I think,
no,
my ancestry coming from North Wales, I feel a little bit slighted by that.
Then there's Virginia. Oh, what you have you named it after someone called Virginia? No, we've named it after someone called Elizabeth. Why have you called it Virginia then?
She was a virgin queen.
Yeah.
There you go.
You know.
True story. Alec Barrett, thank you very much for the this is definitely going to be the last super chat because we're going to wind it up now. Thank you so much for the super chat, mate. Our best records of Troy came from Hattusa. Well, there you go. Brilliant. Okay, so thank you very, very much for watching. Phil might be joining us later. Don't know, might turn up.
Oh no,
after the gym. Who knows? But I'll definitely be here at 9 o'clock for this week's Labour Social, which will be Graham's birthday piss up because I haven't had one yet. So if you'd like to join us for that, you are very welcome to do so. And I'll just say thank you so much for all the great comments and for the super chats. Give us a like on the way out. That's always good. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye. Wave, Phil. Wave. We're going. Wave. Yay.